Susan, I just say whenever you're ready, or we can give it another minute.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on a Saturday morning. It sounds like there are people still coming in to join us, so we'll just do a little introduction while everyone's getting settled. You won't miss anything. Well, I guess they won't know they're here. They won't know they're missing anything because they're not here. Anyway, today's thing is going to be a little bit casual. We want it to be informal so that we can engage and interact with everyone. I do want to encourage you to use the chat feature today. We're going to do lots of chatting and interacting and connecting with each other. That's one of the purposes of our event. So welcome to the Next Generation Council's Nonprofit Leadership Workshop. We are so glad to have you this morning. We have a wonderful lineup of speakers. To get us in the spirit of this morning, I wanted to share, my name is Susan Herzig. I'm the Annual Fund Director at SOAR 365, and I wanted to share a little story about one of our summer campers, Samuel. He has been coming to camp for about 3 years. His mom calls him a horse whisperer because the horses in the field next to them come to him like they don't to anybody else. It's really a cool story to hear. But you wouldn't know that Samuel has autism until you start talking with him. And he really struggles with activities that are kind of one size fits all. Like school is really hard for him, trying to fit into the expectations of all the other children. And while his siblings are able to attend other programs, after school activities, and summer camps, Samuel is not able to join them until they found the SOAR 365 summer camp program at Camp Baker. And at camp, everything is different. Samuel fits in. He's one of the kids. He fits in. He just has a great time. You can tell he's having a great time by the giant smile on his face throughout the entire time. He struggles with communicating, so that's it's just so great to see that on his face. By being here today, you are supporting activities like this with other nonprofits. So that's one of the things that happens at SOAR 365 is we have summer camp and children are being impacted by the programs that we have. And I'm sure most of you are involved with other nonprofits, and by being here today and becoming a leader and learning to grow, you are going to have that same impact on your nonprofit. So I do want to remind you again that we are recording this, and so that also records the chat, even private chats. So I just want to mention that. We are so grateful to our speakers and to the Next Generation Council who helped create this event, and to Tito's Handmade Vodka who helped make this event free for all of you. I will ask, this is my little solicitation here. We do ask if you could make a donation to SOAR 365 to continue supporting this program and all of the programs that we do with SOAR. So with that, I think I will turn it over to Laura Faison, who is one of our members of the Next Generation Council. She's been with us for about a year. Laura's main role is her day job. Is the Director of Community Engagement and Communication at Goodwill, and she's been there for 15 years. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura to kick us off with our first speaker.
All right. Thank you, Susan. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We are thrilled to have you. As we said, we'll get you out of here in time to enjoy the outdoor activities, but it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the day. And we're going to do this a little bit, what we're calling a fireside chat. So if you have questions throughout the segment, feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat, and we'll definitely sprinkle those in. But I'm going to be speaking with Sue Kendrick today. Sue comes to us as a business strategist for nonprofits. And she's the founder of SK Consulting. And Sue, I will tell you, I pulled this straight from your website, so you can embellish a little bit if you'd like. But she comes with a really strong background in nonprofits, which makes her an exceptional consultant for nonprofits. In 2006, she produced Alchemy, which was a national conference around storytelling, nonprofit storytelling. And she's currently the resident storytelling expert at the online fundraising site Asking Matters. And she is a breadth and depth of information and resource. So I would encourage you all to reach out to her beyond this meeting if you have questions. So Sue, anything else you want to say before we get into our chat?
No, thank you for the lovely introduction. I like what I wrote on my website.
There you go. It's good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So we pitched you as kind of the one to help us demystify boards, if you will. So first things first, what exactly is the role of a board of directors within a nonprofit organization?
First, let me say thank you for having me. It's delightful to be here, and I'm glad to see so many people take an interest in enhancing their service with their nonprofit of choice. So what is the role of the board of directors? They're really the leadership team that sets the strategy, the future direction, and they really should be operating at a high level of engagement with the organization, with the programming, but there's a big line between the board of directors and the staff, assuming there is a staff, right? So the board of directors is responsible for managing the performance of the executive director, assuming again that there is an executive director, but essentially they're the leadership team. They set the strategic focus and direction of the organization.
And why is that so critical in a nonprofit space? Why is having that diverse leadership team so important?
Well, I tend to say that serving a nonprofit, particularly at the executive director or the staff leadership level, is kind of like a robust game of whack-a-mole. So you hit with a ballot whatever comes up on your desk until it dies, and then you move on to the next thing. And you always have a catcher's mitt on. So there's a lot of things. So it's really important for the board to be able to take a deep breath and look at things from the helicopter view and see kind of where the road is leading. It's hard to do that when you're in the weeds every day, gardening, right? So it's important for the board to take that elevated step to look at things from either the rooftop or the helicopter view so you can actually see where the road leads.
That's great. That's fantastic. So for anyone who's looking to join a board as a member, kind of what's the number one responsibility of being on a board? And I'm assuming it's not just attending happy hours or galas or those types of things.
It's not. So if you have been asked or have asked to serve on a board of directors, and I think that I think sometimes people wait to be asked. And I would encourage everybody to be a little proactive, to show your interest in being part of a board. And I would think that I tell this to my clients all the time, your best and most important role as a director on a board is personal vulnerability. And by that, I mean the ability to show up at a meeting. Obviously, there's the basics. You show up on time, you contribute, do all the things, but you have to be curious. You have to ask questions. You have to be willing to say, I don't understand that. Why are we making that choice? Why is that different? Why is A different than B? Help me understand that. Sometimes it's as simple as, can you help me understand these financials? I'm not sure I know how to read this material. Can you decode the jargon for me? So those are really hard questions for somebody to open up their vulnerability and say, I don't understand. But I think it's probably the most critical thing that any board member can bring to the table, to be curious, ask a lot of questions, and be willing to ask those questions. And then comes the involvement in events and understanding why those things are important. I just had a conversation with a board the other day about why it's so critical for you to be engaged in the programming. I was working several years ago with a board that was for a food pantry, and only 2 people on that board had ever been to a distribution. So they didn't have that personal connection to distributing the food, to seeing the clients, to handing someone a bag of apples or a loaf of bread, and what that meant to them, and that absolute deep connection. And it really bolsters your why. Why are you there? Why do you feel like your work is making a difference? Why do you feel like the organization's work is making a difference?
That's fantastic. So heading into the unfamiliar waters of a new organization or of joining a board can be a little intimidating. So talk to us a little bit. I love this part of our pre-conversation. Talk to us a little bit about the types of people or that you'll meet on a board or find on a board.
Oh, this is so fun. So everybody goes into this not knowing who they're gonna see. So, for example, I worked with an organization a while back that had this tripartite board. So a third of the board were appointed. A third of the board was government leaders, and a third of the board were clients, people who were represented and served in that community. And you had all those disparate people in a room, and it was so everybody was intimidated by everybody else. So there's always going to be these personality types. You're going to have the, you're going to have Biff from Back to the Future, who's this loudmouth bully and always wants to run over everybody. And you're going to have SpongeBob SquarePants, who is, unbelievable, toxically upbeat and happy. And you're going to have Hermione Granger, who knows everything. Just get out of her way. She knows it all. There are the people who are there. This is my favorite. Dean and I brainstormed this a little bit the other day, and this is my favorite. You're going to have Jack from The Office, who's only there for the snacks and the box lunches. But you're also going to have people who are great note takers, who ask a lot of great questions, and who have read all the material. And those are the people that you really want to emulate as you come onto the board. And the others, you have to look for the contributions that they are making and overlook the fact that their personality quirks are kind of overshadowing the meeting itself.
That's fantastic. I love that, because I think that's applicable to boards and any organization you walk into. So
it's applicable to anything, really.
I love that. So we talked a little bit about, a lot of times folks will want to find an opportunity with a board to bring their day job skill set. So they're an attorney or they're in real estate or but talk a little bit about, that's a fantastic attribute, but what's the real reason someone should look to join a board?
So one of the things that I talk to boards about is that there's this really old-fashioned belief that you should have a skills matrix and that you should go through everybody on your board and they should fit into some predetermined category, like, lawyer, accountant, candlestick maker, baker, ditch digger, whatever it is, they're supposed to fit in these categories. And the reality is all of those are hireable skills. What you really want are people who come to the table with a passion for the work that the organization is doing. And I think one of the things that you can do is kind of figure out what are some of your transferable skills, some of the things that would be applicable. If you were applying for a job, how would you codify the skills that you bring to the table? Maybe you're really great at negotiation. Maybe you're really great at connecting the dots. Maybe you're really good at picking apart a problem. Maybe you're really good at kind of seeing the gold nugget in a cloud of information. There's a whole host of attributes that you might bring to the table. Those are skills, but they're still attributes. And also just that attribute of maybe you're a great storyteller. That's a powerful attribute to bring to the table for a nonprofit. So kind of look and see where you think you might fit in, and don't just look at that as your as what you do in your day job in terms of skills.
That's fantastic. So expanding on that a little bit, what is the best way? Where do you recommend folks start to pursue a board position? How should they determine which organizations they should reach out to? So
the first step is to figure out what your passion is. What do you really support? Are you a big believer in, puppy and kitty adoption? Are you passionate about veterans or homelessness or adoption? Or I think for the nonprofit sector, it's a little bit like the association sector. There's a nonprofit that does whatever it is that you are passionate about. And then you start filtering that down and start looking for organizations in your area that do what you want to do. And then you look and see how responsive they are to your willingness to volunteer. I had a friend not too long ago who is a fantastic photographer, and she volunteered her photography skills for a nonprofit that needed photography skills, and said, I'm happy to come to events or do whatever you need, and happy to give you, offer my photography services pro bono to you, which is a huge gift. And she got a form letter that said, thank you for being willing to volunteer for our organization. And she never heard from them. So she sent them another note that said, by the way, I haven't heard from you. And she still didn't hear from them. And she gave up, and she took those skills and that passion to a different organization that really appreciated the work that she was willing to bring to the table. And I think that's the key, is you want to find an organization that appreciates you being there.
That's good stuff. So let's say you find that organization and you make contact with them. What are the types of questions you should ask before you get involved? What are the things that you should inquire about before joining a board or volunteering?
Oh gosh, there's so many, I can't even begin to list them. But the first thing, I saw somebody pop up in the chat, ask to take a tour, ask to understand what their programs are, ask about the impact that they have. I get this question so often, what about overhead expenses? How much of their money goes to paying their staff or their, executive director's salary? It doesn't matter. None of that matters. What matters is their ability to raise enough funds to have significant impact with the programming that they put out into the community for the community that they serve. So ask about impact, have them tell you stories. Ask a little bit about the board. What is the governance like? Ask to meet the board chair. Ask to meet another staff member, right? Again, ask for a tour of the organization. Before you agree to do that, maybe to attend an event. We talked very briefly earlier about going to, a nonprofit happy hour or, something like that. Well, those are really considered, they're not money makers. Even though they're billed as a fundraiser, they're not money makers for the organization. They are really to raise awareness about the work of the organization. So go there and meet other people who are there to support the organization. And then after you get on the board, continue to go to those events and bring somebody with you so that you can continue to raise awareness about that organization. That is your role as a director, to be an ambassador for the organization and take their work out into the community.
That's fantastic. So we've talked a little bit about, how do you pursue a board? So in the event they don't have open board opportunities, do you recommend getting involved in other things? So to your point, volunteering, those types of things?
Absolutely. So there's any number of ways you can volunteer. There's all kinds of, any nonprofit worth their salt has a list of a great volunteer opportunities, and they could extend from working an event to office work to filing. Sometimes they might need, an IT person. They might need somebody to come in and help them in the office, and they might need somebody to come out and man a table or a booth at an event. So those are all great ways to get involved. But there's also ways to show up at events. And I had something in my head and it won't come. So I think there's great ways to get involved. The other thing that you can do is ask if they have a committee structure. A lot of organizations have committees that are comprised of both board members and non-board members. And those committee structures are considered a pipeline for board service. So a lot of organizations will look to the non-board members on their committees for their next set of nominations to bring to the table. So you'll get on the board, you just have to be a little patient sometimes.
That's great advice. Carrie in the chat made a good comment about financial commitment is another great question to ask. So I know that can be intimidating, especially for young professionals. What is your advice on kind of navigating that conversation in those waters around financial?
Well, I think that the question is really, how solvent are you as an organization, right? So how much money is allocated to programming? So there's never a financial commitment to the board, right? So the board is all pro bono service. All of that work is unpaid. But I think there's also the question of, how do you fundraise? Part of a board's job is fundraising and opening doors and making connections for people like the executive director, the board chair, those people on the board. Fundraising is not all about asking your friends and family for money. It just isn't. And certainly not the quid pro quo fundraising that so many people get into, where they say, you give my organization $100, I'll give your organization $100, and then it's just a wash. Yeah. So it's that repetitive donation. What you're really trying to do is you're trying to move people along the spectrum of funding, from being a lurker, where they kind of know your organization and they really don't know much about you, to being a supporter of your organization. They go from somebody who might know you a little bit, be a little bit engaged. When they get to be a supporter, then they start giving you some money and they start coming to your events. And then by the time you get on the board, you should be an ambassador, right? That ambassador is an individual who goes out into the community and raises awareness and opens doors and makes commitments. So when you talk about financial commitment, you can also be talking about, what is the cost of being on the board? In other words, is there an expectation for me to give a check, write a check? And there always is. Most organizations have gotten past the idea that there's a give or get. So you either give $500 or $5,000, or you get that amount of money. Most organizations have gotten past that, and they have moved on to, we want you to make a meaningful gift. Mm-hmm. You know, we want you to do something that hurts a little bit, a stretch. We call it a stretch gift, right? So it's not really comfortable, but you're doing it because it's so meaningful to you to do that. And if they require you to pay to be on that board, I consider that selling the seat. And those are for organizations that have boards that are really all just deep pockets. And it's not it's a high level governance board, and you're only there because you can give a big gift. And those aren't the kind of boards that anybody really wants to volunteer for, because you don't get the emotional impact that comes from giving your time.
That's fantastic. So just kind of closing thoughts, and then we'll take some questions. But
sure. What's
your number one, if you could give one piece of advice to young professionals looking to join a board, what would that be?
Wow. Just one, really?
Just one.
I think really it's, if you decide that volunteer service is for you, which it should be. Everybody gets so much richness out of giving of their time to somebody that needs their time, right? But once you make that commitment, keep that commitment. There's so much attrition at the board level, at the volunteer level. Really, you have to look deep within yourself and say, do I have the time? Do I have the commitment? Can I keep that commitment? And, that's not taking into consideration the fact that life happens. Life happens. But be committed to staying the course.
I think that's great. Thank you, Sue.
My pleasure.
We're happy to
questions,
take any,
yeah.
I was gonna say, any questions if folks want to come off mute or type them in the chat. Or you might have time for a second piece of advice. All right.
Nothing?
Not seeing any questions pop up. Looks like Susan is going to share. Oh, there's your contact information. And again, for the folks on with us today, I definitely encourage you to reach out to Sue. We could never cover the breadth and depth of her knowledge in 20 minutes. So definitely reach out to her, have those conversations. She is a fantastic storyteller. Oh, we did have a question come up. What are some ways to engage recent graduates from universities?
That's a great question. So part of that, the challenge there is finding them. And if you have a pool of recent graduates that you can tap into, then I would start by creating an awareness opportunity. The other thing that is really inexpensive for the nonprofit to do and really creates great goodwill and great connectivity is simply have an information session. Schedule an information session. You can schedule it in a bar and have that just be an open opportunity for people to ask questions. In a group setting, people are generally more likely to ask a lot of questions. What about, what if? And that feeds that group energy. So I guess if I were making a recommendation, I would suggest on the nonprofit side of things to engage those recent graduates, I would look at hosting an information session.
That's fantastic. Any other questions for Sue before we take a quick break?
Thank you so much for letting me
Absolutely.
come on and just chat. I love these kinds of conversations.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us today. And I guess, Susan, I'll hand it back over to you. I think we're heading to a quick break.
Are we doing a break right now?
Maybe.
Yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, we'll do a 5-minute break. So we could say we'll see everybody back about 2 or 3 after the half hour.
Great. Thank you, Sue.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Laura, for leading such a great conversation.
No problem.
Yes, great question, Laura.
No problem. Well, you make it easy, Sue. I did have my little cheat sheet of questions here.
I do like that takeaway of asking questions and taking a tour. Like that's such a great way to, as a, I'm a staff member, and as a staff member, I love it when people are like, tell me more or ask me, like, I'm curious about this.
And I think for staff, what it does is it allows you to identify which areas of work that individual might be interested in. And then you can focus your energy with them on that. Maybe they're interested in summer camp. Maybe they're interested in a daycare program. Maybe they're interested in, fundraising. Maybe they're interested in classroom IT skills. Whatever that might be, then you can hone your message to them in a way that connects them and engages them.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah, that is definitely something that I struggle with a little bit as a staff member, because SOAR 365 serves infants through senior adults. So that's a wide spectrum of people that we're providing programs for.
Absolutely.
And everyone has their own interests in what they like. People who care deeply about senior adults may not care so much about babies.
That's right. That's right.
If you go at them with the wrong message, then you turn them off.
That's right. And that's why storytelling is so vital, to have a deep understanding of how to craft that story in a way that your listeners can hear it and understand the brain science behind why those stories are so important.
Mm-hmm. Great. I feel like we should stop talking for a minute to allow people to take a break.
I was going to say, Susan, if you want to kill the screen sharing. I'm going to leave you spotlit for introducing Danielle, though.
Okay, well, let me just turn over to Danielle's slide real quick so we can get her information in there.
Oh. I'll remove the spotlight for the moment, so you don't have to worry about seeing.
That's okay. We have such a great group here today. We have 33 people.
Yeah, it's great.
This is really exciting. While we are just kind of waiting to get started, does everyone want to maybe type in your name and your favorite nonprofit? We can kind of get a feel for the room.
And we won't judge you based on your answers. So
You can do multiple answers.
For example, acceptable answers are SOAR, Children's Museum, Goodwill. Oh, Chris, thanks for jumping in. Thanks, Chris, one of our leaders of the Next Generation Council. So. Oh, mitzvah marketing, yeah.
I
Nice.
hadn't heard of that. I'll have to check that one out. I love learning about all the nonprofits in Richmond. There's so many, and there's so many good ones. It's really
that have been here for a long time too. I'm goodness knows I'm still learning about ones that like, oh wow, yeah, and it's 20 years old or 40 years old. Oh, Sportable, yeah. Yeah. Hunter's a dear friend.
Yeah, Girls on the Run. Oh, a food pantry.
Oh, nice.
There's some good ones.
Well done, Kelly. Good choices.
Kelly knows her audience.
That's great. Let's see.
Well, while we're talking about all these nonprofits, I'll just do a little plug for Summerfest. The Next Generation Council is working on Summerfest, which is going to be held July 22nd. And we're taking a little bit of a twist to it this year and trying to make it kind of an all abilities festival. And part of that is we want to showcase nonprofits in the community that do benefit individuals with disabilities. Since Park 365 was designed for all abilities and all children, including children with disabilities. So we want to feature some other nonprofits. And so as I'm watching this list of nonprofits come through, I'm thinking like, who would be a good one? Like, oh yeah, let's, I think that food pantry, Mitzvah Market might be a good one to bring out, or NAMI would be a good one to invite to our festival. So if that sounds like something that might be interesting to you and your favorite nonprofit, please do reach out. I'm definitely going to make a list of these and we'll be trying to reach out to some of them. So a great way to build our community and make it stronger together. All right, well, let's go ahead and switch over to our next speaker, Danielle Riperton. Danielle is this executive director at the Children's Museum of Richmond. She started there December 2019. So she was there a whole 4 months before the pandemic hit. And so Danielle's going to talk to us a little bit about the pivoting and what to do in crisis and a pandemic. Her energy and enthusiasm and experience about the Children's Museum is really inspiring. And so I look forward to talking with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan. And I should say thank you to Kelly Mattingly, who serves on both the SOAR 365 Next Generation Council and the Seymour Associate Board, who connected me. Glad to be with you all this morning. I do wish that I had a cool last name like Sue, because I think kindred, like I would love to be your kindred spirit, but you could also change it to guru and that would work too. I particularly loved the references to whack-a-mole and the catcher's mitt, and then the personalities of the board members. I continue to love learning, and so thank you for your words of wisdom this morning. And I can't wait to hear from Dean too. Thank you,
Danielle. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for having me. I prepared something for about 3 hours. So if everybody's ready to just, buckle down, and no, just kidding. So when Kelly and Dean and Susan were talking about what this intent for this morning was, I had already thought about several things that I wanted to share with you all, but it really crystallized how I wanted to present the information. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to try to be technologically savvy might even try to say those words at the same time. I think that maybe you can see
It
my
worked.
slides.
You're good.
Yes, thank you. Whew. Takes a village, y'all. And I hope that it won't be as boring as this kickoff slide, which is really awful. So I wanted to share with you all a little bit through pictures about the Children's Museum and about the past year. Because it started really normal. As Susan mentioned, I came to the museum in December of 2019. Even though Legendary Santa was going on, which is truly legendary, there's a lot to Legendary Santa at the museum. It felt like a normal beginning. I was getting to know the world. I was getting to know the Children's Museum world. And all of a sudden, a pandemic struck and literally everything started turning upside down. And I want to tell you all that when I told my team that I was going to be speaking on pivoting, they all kind of breathed out because I have stopped using that word. They cannot stand to hear the word pivot anymore because they are done with that word. And as soon as I go through some of the things that we've pivoted on in the past year, you will understand how they feel that way. But in the meantime, I just wanted to get a feel for this group, and I'm going to try again this technology thing. And if you all will go to menti.com, you can go, let me drop it in the chat. You can go on whatever device you're using right now, or you can go on your phone. And if you enter that code 51681291, you can enter up to 3 words that you most dislike from the pandemic. So pivot is your word, you can enter that. But the fun thing about this is as you all participate, and I'm crossing my fingers that this works, as soon as you participate, the words will start showing up like a word cloud on here. And the ones that have the most hits in terms of the same word, they will be bigger than the others. Social distance, yes, thank you. I love how I feel like I have to turn my head to keep reading the words. I don't know if you all are doing that too. Rescheduled, oh, yes. Mandate, I don't know about you all, but I keep trying to find the dates on all the mandates that come out. Like, you know, we have to follow them. Like, can I please find a date somewhere on here so that I know which mandate I'm under? Yes, sorry. Hoax, yes. Am I on mute right now? Just kidding. The Virginia Association of Museums did a conference a couple of months ago, and I loved it. They sent out a packet in advance and it had little stickers. I should have brought them home with me because one of them is a sticker you could hold up that says you're on mute. And the other one was something about a coffee break, which is totally me. I need coffee or else I have no energy for the day. Awesome. Well, I think what I'll do is go ahead and take this down and keep talking. We're going to do another one of these at the end. And I think I can share the results. I don't know if anybody's interested in it or if it'll just be something I put up on my wall behind me for my team as they're hating the word pivot. There's more words that they can hate too. Oh, golly, got to figure out how to get out of this. And there we go. So the before times, we talked about those. Let's talk about the first pivot that the Children's Museum went through. And this is one that I have to say our associate board did the heavy lift on the pivot here. And I was grateful. I saw Shaylee chime in the chat. Shaylee's on our associate board as well as Kelly. We have a great associate board. And one of the things that they are really awesome about every year is doing a big gala called Carnival. And Carnival for 2020 was scheduled for March 21st, which you can imagine how much of a problem that was. And so when we decided, even before the museum had to close for the pandemic, that we were going to have to postpone the event. And it was very stressful for the associate board members, for the event planners that were working so hard on it, for our team. And so they quickly pivoted, there's that word, to do a spring auction with a few of the items from the auction that would no longer work if the event happened later. And it was really critical for the museum at that time because of the funding that we needed. Carnival brings in about $200,000 for our organization. So you can imagine kind of the fear of not having this big fundraiser as we're going into a pandemic. And so there was a quick pivot to do a spring auction. And then they pivoted again for the same event, the same committee, the same volunteer committee, and the same team at the museum in order to do Carnival as a virtual event in September, which was tough. I mean, we were all figuring it out, right? This platform right now is something that we're used to a year later, but as SOAR 365 was doing this last year, I'm sure that you all were, trying to figure out the best methods to do it. And, we're all in this new normal. That's one of those words I should have put up there in that word cloud of how do we figure this out? And so I can't say enough about the team that was able to make sure that an event happened, not once, but twice during a pandemic. But also we were able to engage skills-based volunteers. So we had an incredible videographer who helped put together a video that showcased the depth of the Children's Museum that we were able to share for that September virtual Carnival. And we couldn't have done that event if it hadn't been for the volunteerism for somebody who has just incredible skills. So that's pivot number one, which happened twice. I don't know if anybody's going to keep a tally, but there's the first one. So here's our next major step of pivoting. When you are used to delivering your services in person, it is quite a challenge to figure out then how to deliver them in a virtual environment. And this, the heavy lift on programming, I'm going to say it was the staff team that really figured out how to make sure that we could continue to deliver our mission in the community while we were in the pandemic. But we were also really lucky to have some great volunteers who stepped in different ways. So the picture on the left, oh goodness gracious, it's probably on your left as you're looking at the screen, is our director of education at the back of a car full of books. We have a book bank at the Children's Museum that if you are an organization that serves children from low-income communities, or if you're a Title I school, you can request books from the book bank, and books are delivered to the museum. We hold them, we sort them, we make sure that they are like new or new in order for children to be gifted with a book. It is about book ownership. And so this whole process had to be completely revamped during the pandemic. And we started working more closely with communities and schools and with the school systems themselves in order to distribute books. And we're so grateful now that we feel like we are coming out of, and we know how to work with volunteers in our building to be able to welcome our book bank volunteers back, because they help with the sorting and the stickering and the getting the books ready for distributions and bringing them in. And that's one of the other ways that the associate board is just really incredible with helping at the Children's Museum. The second piece was we had just launched a new website. Thank goodness it had blog capabilities, because we didn't have that before. And so our educators quickly pivoted, there's the word again, to be able to do activities for families to enjoy at home. I don't know about you all. I am a parent myself. I know the types of resources that I was looking for during the pandemic for my kids. And I was looking for things that I knew were going to be high quality and that I could trust that if I was putting them in front of a screen, which yes, I did, probably for too many hours in the day, but that they were quality activities that would engage my children. And so our team did that. But then what's really cool is we actually ended up finding a teacher who wasn't teaching anymore, and she wanted something to do during the pandemic. And so she's a volunteer blogger for us, which is super awesome. It's a help for our team. And then virtual programming. So we started delivering our program virtually So all of our field trips, our educators, they're able to say that we're technology faster than I can because they pivoted all of their field trips to be able to be delivered virtually. And it was really incredible for them to learn this new language of technology and be able to sometimes speak to classrooms that they can't even see the kids that they're interacting with because of privacy with one of the groups that they typically deliver field trips for. And so for them to be able to create that content and deliver it virtually is just amazing. And so out of the pandemic has also a new advisory council for the Children's Museum been born, which is a teacher advisory council, so that our educators have a sounding board to go back to and say, is this working? What field trip works for you all? And have a little bit more in depth than the quick survey at the end of the field trips. So that's a little bit about our programming that pivoted. Oh golly, here we go. Location. So this is the one that I will say probably is the most painful for me to talk about. And I think because part of it is there are going to be some wounds that come out of coronavirus and the pandemic and what organizations have had to go through. This set of pictures demonstrates for me just how traumatic that the pandemic was for some organizations in our community and for all organizations as they were trying to figure out what life looked like during and as we all moved through the pandemic. So when our organization had to close down 4 locations on March, we did it the evening of March 13th. I would say that is definitely, it was Friday the 13th in so many ways. So the 14th was the first day that the Children's Museum was closed in all 4 locations. And before that, we were closed about 6 days out of the year. We were a 7-day-a-week operation and closed 6 days out of the year. There was no way to predict how long we would physically be closed. But what we knew immediately and had started feeling at the beginning of March was that all of our earned revenue streams were getting cut off. So 70% of our revenue came from earned revenue, and then 30% came from contributions from the community. And 70% of our revenue went out the door right away. And I already told you all that Carnival had to be rescheduled. So there was another major piece of our financial picture. The board really engaged here. And this is where I can't say enough about boards and their leadership and the critical work that they do. And I am so grateful that the board that was in place at the Children's Museum before I got there was the board that was in place during the pandemic and as we've moved through it, because they met in April and they set forth a series of priorities that guided how we operated. And first and foremost, they said, we don't know how long the pandemic is going to last, but we know that the Children's Museum as an entity has to survive. We have to survive the pandemic. And that may mean a series of things, but the first of which is we're going to pause our strategic plan because we cannot focus on that right now. That's not where the priority is. And the second piece was that above all else, we own the building downtown, and that is the core of the operation. And so the downtown location must survive. And then the last of which is no matter what happens, we have to be as kind and courteous to our staff as possible. And so it was all about financial survival. And that was really probably the first 6 months of the pandemic for the museum. And it was hard. It was very, very hard. We had to pretty quickly lay off several team members. And then throughout the summer, everybody went through some sort of a furlough or a pay reduction in order for us to be able to make it through. We ended up actually physically closing 2 locations. So we are down 2 locations from what we were going into the pandemic. And these pictures kind of show what it was like during that time. We permanently closed both Fredericksburg and Short Pump locations. We were paying market rate rent, and we knew that that was not going to be able to happen. We didn't have the income, and it was going to put the Children's Museum under. And those things were hard. They were so hard. And, you know, I can't say enough about the network of the board as well in that time, because I had to do some really hard PR conversations. Fredericksburg closing was like closing a children's museum in a small town that had born the museum. It was as if we would have closed the Richmond Children's Museum for that community. And being able to have a sounding board of an expert who does PR for a living was really incredible. As I waded my way through, I love NPR, but I did not want to be on Morning Edition talking about a Fredericksburg location closure. But that's what had to happen. And I leaned on a volunteer to help me prepare for those interviews. One of the other pieces that was born out of this was the creativity and the resilience of the team. And I think that that's what these pictures demonstrate to me as well. Our facilities and exhibits team was able to really do some hero work during this time. And you'll see here, they uncovered in the treehouse. If anybody has come to the downtown location, one of the favorites is the apple tree. And it had been carpeted for years, and the carpet was in really bad shape. And so the team was trying to do as much as they could with the resources they had in the building, which was mostly themselves and all of the materials that were around. So they pulled up the carpet in the treehouse, and lo and behold, they found underneath that there used to be the tree rings of the tree that was in there. And so they refinished the floor, and our art studio coordinator repainted it. So now if you come back to the tree in the downtown location, you can see the rings of the tree, which is super cool. But they also got rid of the dig pits. You'll see the guys in the middle, they're taking dig pits out because you can't sanitize all the little pieces of a dig pit, which was the protocols that we knew we were going to be coming back into. And then, it's other alterations of moving front desks forward 6 inches to have enough space for our team to be able to pass. So there was all kinds of different pieces that had to go in the forethought of reopening the 2 locations that we have remaining. And I will say the primary reasons that the board and the leadership team decided that we were going to make sure that the downtown and the Chesterfield location survived is for 2 reasons. Both have significant exhibit space. So we knew that when we rebooted that we could really deliver our mission critically and in the way that we want to with the exhibit space that was available in those 2 locations. They're pretty similar actually in terms of size for the exhibits. But the second is downtown, we serve as a destination for families coming to downtown Richmond. We say downtown, we're not quite downtown, but we'll call it. But we're also on the Pulse line. We're very accessible. And that is one of the things that we want to make sure as a museum. Interestingly, in Chesterfield, we serve a lot of rural Virginia. And so we wanted to make sure that we were continuing to do that. And we felt like as a museum and removing as many barriers as possible to bringing people to the museum, we were going to do that. And so that's primarily why the downtown and the Chesterfield locations survived in terms of the locations. So that's the painful part. And I got through it without crying, which I think is the best part of all this. So the next one I think is one of my favorite pivots during the pandemic. And this is one that there's a huge series of events that seriously, I could talk to you all probably for another half hour about what happened with this series. But I'll try and summarize it, which is about almost exactly a year ago, the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor rocked our community. And out of that was born one of the most incredible initiatives that I've seen in maybe ever. I'm going to say maybe ever, which is called Mending Walls. And Mending Walls was born, and I was really lucky during the pandemic to be introduced virtually to a lot of other museum directors. Bill Martin at the Valentine pulls together the Richmond museum directors quarterly to make sure that we're all talking and in coordination with each other. And APT at the Poe Museum had introduced me to this concept of mending walls. And through a series of events in which I cannot say enough about the thoughts and the resilience and the integral involvement that our team has in the community, we had already decided that something needed to happen on the front wall of our Broad Street location, which was this blank wall. You can kind of see the whitewashed brick wall that faced Broad Street. It's right across from the Pulse. It was very boring. And we decided to donate our wall to Mending Walls, which hands down might be one of the best decisions that I made during the pandemic. It was that we were going to take the leap and donate the wall. And one of the cool things is that Mending Walls was working with Hands on Greater Richmond. So another great group that I highly recommend if you all are looking for ways to get involved in our community. Mending Walls and Hands on Greater Richmond are two great things to check out. And I'm going to drop their links in the chat. But we donated our wall, and the first day of school, actually, for the 2021 school year, September 8th, we had a group of volunteers. There were people involved with the museum. One of our associate board leaders was down with us, and then through Hands on Greater Richmond, a couple of volunteers came out, and there was a community conversation. And then they started the Mending Wall installation that is at the Children's Museum. And I dropped the links in the chat so that if you want to check it out, there is a map of all the Mending Walls that are in town. Highly recommend doing the map to see all of them. But I would love for you all to, at some point, read the words of the artists and what their vision for this wall was, because it's really incredible. One of them wrote a poem, and one of them wrote an excerpt of what their vision for the wall is. But you can see what was born out of a lot of strife and a lot of tough conversation, and then a lot of necessary change in our community. You can see it come to fruition in the wall at the Children's Museum, which is just incredible. So you can see the plaque in the middle, and then the finished wall. It's actually two walls. We kind of cheated the system and got two out of this. I don't know how. But the front wall and the side wall of the pavilion got painted as part of Mending Walls. But again, volunteers being involved, and oh, thank you, Laura, for dropping that in. That's just another incredible way that volunteers were involved. So now that we've talked about an incredible way that the pandemic has given us some resources, I'm going to drop the next Menti slide up. Oh golly, hopefully I can get to it. Y'all, technology yet again for me. I would love to hear from you all what you're most grateful for in the pandemic, what it's helped to change, or a word that really signifies any silver lining. Maybe I just gave two examples that I shouldn't have. And we'll do another of these word cloud exercises for the group. Reset priorities. Working from home, you know, don't tell my HR director I said this. Oh, it's being recorded. Well, I have to say it now. I had the cutest coworkers during COVID. I mean, I got to have lunch every once in a while with my middle schooler. She would make me a pizza in the middle of the day if she knew that I was having a tough day and needed lunch. Family, time with kids. Yes, health. I will tell you all, I used to call my mother every day on the way to work before. I can't do that anymore because she needs her sleep in the mornings, but she would say, Danielle, run a lap before you get there. You've got too much energy and they're not going to be able to deal with you today. So health has become a priority for me in the pandemic. Like I try and do a quick run and yoga before I start the day. Perks for introverts, yes. Thinking differently. How many times have you all heard that we can finally think differently because everything's broken? No commute. I will tell you all, I actually started missing my drive time because I realized that's when I think. Time with dog. I love this. I love the fact that we're all finding good things that have come out of a lot of tough times. Internet, you know, I have loved the internet, and there have been times that I have just cursed it when it's not worked right. Awesome. All right, so my team really groaned over this one, but I'm going to share with you all kind of where we started to reset ourselves and the pivot and how we were going to deal with this word. So the word being pivot, I'm not joking with you all. I do not say the word pivot on my team unless I say pivot and I like laugh and wink afterwards because they really cannot handle it. But here's the framework that I have gone through in every decision. And I will tell you, even this past week, as I was thinking about how we were going to talk about pivoting in a nonprofit, I was thinking about this because the pausing, I think, is one of the hardest parts for all of us, right? We are used to being on the go. But a few years ago, a very wise person at a leadership conference said, 5 deep breaths literally resets the cortisol in your brain. 5 deep breaths and a pause. So if we can all pause, there is such a rare point that we have to act immediately. Outside of major emergencies, even in all of the pieces that I shared with you all and how we pivoted during the pandemic, we were able to pause at least for a moment, catch our breath, and really think. So the interpreting, what are the things around me? What are the resources that I have? Who are the volunteers that I can lean on? What are the things that I need to assess in order to make a decision? And then we would veer. So I think that this is one of I've always worked in nonprofits. I love nonprofit organizations. I think that there's such a beauty in being able to be in the nonprofit space because the mission and the vision of the organization are always guiding you. So in especially our work, there's never a true about face that happens. You're always veering to make sure that you're keeping the mission and the vision, but you may sometimes have to veer, whether it's for online programming or whatever you're trying to do. And then observing, is it working? Is it not? Do we have to change course again? Do we need to restart the cycle? And then the last one being ta-da. And this one might be the most trite, but I will say the reason I say ta-da is because a friend of mine in college, a Division I soccer athlete who was a firefighter, was in a horrific accident on an interstate, and she calls it now the brain bonk. But she went from being a firefighter to taking a couple of years until she could walk around the block. And if you can imagine the devastation in her life to be at that point. But what I love about her is that walk around the block for her, she says ta-da every time, ta-da. So if she makes it through the day without a headache, ta-da. And that is one of the things that I think is the most critical for the pivot, is that we have to celebrate those little successes, because it is never going to be that defining moment of this is it, this is the end of the ta-da. So we have to wait for that final celebration, but celebrating the whole way around. So there's my very corny, and my team groaned and they said, who came up with this, Danielle? And I was like, I did, I was driving and I had to think about something. But there's my pivot ta-da that I think is important. And I remember this week in terms of especially the pausing. So here's the success, I think, for the Children's Museum for May 8th. We celebrated 40 years, which I think is extremely exciting. We celebrated it with balloons, which is, super fun. I don't know any kid who, well, there are some kids who don't like balloons, but most kids love balloons. And a good celebration, and it's COVID friendly. So that was super helpful. But we celebrated 40 years. We celebrated the success of making it through. And I think I was shouting from the rooftops. Our board could hear my shouts, with all caps text through the emails of we did it. We made it through this horrible year to be able to celebrate 40 years and look at the 40 years beyond. And that's what I got this morning. So if you all want to connect, if you want to reach out, if you have questions, I know that I was supposed to reserve time for questions if there's any now, but if you want to reach out to me, I hope that you will.
So great. Thank you, Danielle. Anybody have any? Oh, we got one from Chris there in the chat.
Yeah, Chris says, what would you say were the most helpful skills board members contributed during your pivoting during the early days of the pandemic? Specifically thinking about unique character skills.
Honestly, and I think especially one of our board members, I think, is a great example of, she's a super high up executive at a corporation, and she does operations. And one of the things that her voice and her expertise was able to lend probably was not the one that we all would have expected, but it was her operations mindset of both being on top of how all the different regulations affect us and in different ways. She's my constant reminder. She's looking at 50 states and their guidelines. So when I'm worried about Virginia's guidelines and I hear her trying to triangulate 50 states and localities and all the guidelines of their operations, I think, okay, let me put this back in perspective. But every single finance committee meeting, we would prep beforehand. She would help me as a standing board of questions and how we could prep for the meeting. But she would start them all with saying, and it was her credibility in saying this, of we are doing the best that we can at the time that we are making the financial decision for the information we are presenting to make the decision. But we are not going to be right with the budget that we're presenting for the next 12 months. It's going to be wrong. And we're going to keep thinking about this and keep moving. So her business mindset really helped with the pandemic. And I'll say, we had construction issues. We have somebody who is in construction on the board. And so he would, triangulate and help us to figure out who we could reach out to in terms of the construction community. That was a new world for me in terms of construction and real estate. I relied heavily on one of our bankers who does commercial real estate to be able to understand how do you work with lease terminations and all of the mess that goes along with that. Because I think that's one of the beauties of nonprofits is people want to get involved because, back to what Sue said, they are passionate and you have your individual expertise that you can bring to the table. The executive director, the team at the nonprofit doesn't have that expertise. So bring that to the table so that they can rely on you for the things that you know and you live day in and day out.
Great. This has been really inspiring, Danielle. If there are any other questions, if anybody wants to pop them in to the chat now, or if you want to save them, we'll do another Q&A at the end. This has been really inspiring and really exciting to kind of see the behind the scenes. I know it definitely was really hard for you going through it, and it was really interesting seeing behind the scenes the things that you had to go through. It helps me to keep in mind and perspective of what the pandemic has done to all of our nonprofits and all of our businesses. And as we're jumping so quickly back into the new normal and going into this maskless new phase of there's damage. This is not back to the new. This is not. I'm not going back to normal in the same way. Somebody is walking by with a barking dog. I'm so sorry.
Susan, one of the things that I heard recently was that we are going into the next normal. And I love that because it's not normal. It's not new. And we're not going back. But if we can go in the next, then we continue that forward momentum. And I love that.
I like that too. And I'm thinking personally of what are some of the things that I can take with me to this new normal of slowing down and, taking those deep breaths and remembering what we appreciate so much about the pandemic and trying to take those good things with us to the future. Let me just check the chat, see if there are any other questions. All right. Well, thank you so much, Danielle. We appreciate it. Should we take just a 3-minute break if anybody needs to get up and refresh their drinks?
Yeah, that'd be good. I mean, I'd say that, we'll start right on the dot at 11:15. How about that?
Okay.
We have time. Great.
So just take a few minutes and
thank you, Danielle. That was amazing.
Thanks, Danielle. Great. I'm always such a fan of taking these breaks in between, because you do want to be paying attention, and but you need a refill. You can only be in a meeting for so long before you do need to jump up or step away for just a moment. It's like the commercial breaks. My husband and I have been watching a lot of Netflix, and he's a big pauser of the show. Makes me crazy trying to watch a TV show with him, but you don't have the commercials in the same way that you used to have just watching TV, so you miss that. So you do have to pause it, which is great that you can pause it to be able to get up.
Oh my gosh, Danielle, I learned so much from your talk. That was fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Sue. I learned from you too. And I can't wait to hear from Dean. So Dean and I have served on the U of R Institute on Philanthropy Advisory Board together, and but I've never been able to go to the Marketing Institute to see him and his element of teaching. So I'm excited about what's to come too.
Me
In
too.
my element, Sue could tell you what my element may be.
That's another
I don't think
segment
that's the
also.
element she's talking about, Dean.
Danielle, I would just like to thank you for now having something in my head other than the scene from Friends to associate with the word pivot, because all I've thought about for the past year is them trying to get the couch up the stairs. And so now I have your nice little visual. I can just see Ross screaming pivot over and over again. So now I have something else to go with it. So thank you for that.
Brilliant.
I love that.
Funny.
I particularly like the 5 deep breaths. I'm going to start incorporating that. I don't know. Can you do that like every 5 minutes?
Right. Yeah. How about before anyone answers a question?
Right?
Don't just say the quickest thing. Think about what you.
Great. All right. Well, let's go ahead and turn it over to Dean. Dean's day job. He is the principal owner of Feedback for the past 11 years and an adjunct professor at VCU of Business. He also does some speaking at the Institute of Philanthropy with the University of Richmond. But what I enjoy the most about Dean is his advisory role on the Next Generation Council. I find him so inspiring, and so he brings such energy to our young professionals, and I enjoy working with him. And I know I think he's going to talk a little bit today about his new project, Hidden in Plain Sight, and maybe give us a little background on what makes him so inspiring and so incredible. So Dean?
Definitely be part of it. Thank you, Susan. So as the one removing and adding spotlights here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen while folks are rejoining too. All right. Hopefully that worked. All right. Well, first off, thanks everybody. It is humbling to follow both Danielle's incredible story with the Children's Museum, as well as being able to hear from my good friend Sue as well, and her advice. So mine is going to be a little bit different because I really wanted to take this in a direction and be kind of vulnerable and open with you on not just my own personal journey about how I've made some decisions, but then what I've learned along the way. So what we're going to do is really look at this from the standpoint of, becoming more than just a volunteer. And I want to show you how I did that, but maybe more importantly, I want to show you why. So who the heck am I and why am I up here? Just as Susan said, my day job is a market research firm that I helped create. In that, I get to do what we call digital ethnography. Think Jane Goodall and the gorillas, but we do it online. I then teach that technique at VCU, grad students at VCU. And then, like Danielle mentioned, I get to teach nonprofits through the Institute of Philanthropy at University of Richmond. I do lots of other stuff that's really more writing focused. I'm a playwright, co-founder of Hidden in Plain Sight, co-wrote a book on Gen X and healthcare. And so that writing's kind of like my personal passion, other than talking, probably, since the teaching bit. All right, yeah, right. But what in the heck did I do with nonprofits, and why am I giving this speech? Like, what's the point? So look, here's the thing. If you really want to boil down, it's that I told the organizations that I care about to buckle up, and that I was going to dive in completely. And so what I want to tell you about today is basically 4 little case studies. Okay, my personal case studies, like my little personal stories, about 4 organizations that I chose because they had to do with, they're 4 organizations that you could easily break down into where I live, who I care about, what I like, and what I have to do. And these are not random in any way. I mean, these are things that I've given to and been a part of lots of organizations, but the ones that ended up really coalescing for me tended to fall into these buckets. And I'm hoping that this helps you think about, just like I think Sue really started that discussion really great today, you know, think about what you care about, and then find those organizations that help you make those connections. So, all right, let's dive in first. Okay, look, I could tell you how I got to be standing next to Miss Virginia in a very muddy river, referred to in an event, the Pig River Ramble. This is from 2003. I was 5 years old at the time. But there's Morris Stevenson's on the left, who's also one of my favorite people in the universe. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but he was basically the entire one-man band for a local newspaper and was there covering the fact that Miss Virginia showed up at our canoe race thing for this event. But how in the world did I get roped into this? Let me just go ahead and say, I am not a most outdoorsy person. There's nothing that's ever in the pockets on these cargo shorts that are being worn here. Like, I'm not the outdoorsy kind. And I could tell you how I got involved with the organization. The organization's name was the Community Partnership for Revitalization of Rocky Mountain, Franklin County. And as you could see, the logo on the bottom left was just as messy as that name. But the point was, it's a Main Street organization, meaning it was about revitalizing this little town. Now, I'm not from there. I grew up in Yorktown, Virginia. If some of you may know where Ferrum College in Franklin County is, that's on the other side of the state, in the southwestern part of Virginia. And I was the PR director at Ferrum College for about 8 years. And that experience also meant I happened to be there when my daughter was born, my daughter Addison. And she and my wife at the time, and we were living there. We were becoming a part of the community, and I really started caring about it and wanted to do more. So I joined this organization. I went from volunteer to on the board to chairman of the board in that 8 years, which is kind of crazy for a come here. You know, the come heres versus the been heres. Come heres aren't really supposed to be able to do this kind of thing. So I can tell you how all this happened, but it's more important to really tell you why. And the why is, I loved the town. This is where my daughter was going to be born, was born, and then would spend the first few years of her life. And it was really about the people then that really became my best friends when I was there. And that's everyone from John Shop, who in Center Stage Catering is like literally one of the nicest people you'll ever meet in your entire life. Chopper and Hope and their kids. This is actually a photo of them adopting 3 sisters at once that have become an incredible part of their family. John Carlin, this is kind of hilarious. If you're from that area, you may know him as like probably one of the more famous newscasters in the area. And he would come to these marathons that we started putting on to raise money for the town. That's my daughter, Addie, when she was very, very young. Ironically, John would end up taking my job at Ferrum after I left, which is kind of a funny bit. And then the Nixes, who are dear friends of us and were the godparents of their kids. But my whole point is, I didn't pick this organization because I loved the organization or I really loved historic revitalization. Like, I didn't know anything about those things. I learned more about tax credits than I could possibly ever want to know. Beyond the word tax credit really was talking about anything I wanted to ever know. It was an incredible experience and a humbling one, but I learned a lot through it. I learned that if you want to put down roots, you have to own the soil. You've got to take it. You have to own the fact that this is your town. This is your community, and you want to get your hands dirty with it. you have to learn what you can add without subtracting from others. Yes, I came into it with this head of steam that I was in public relations, and boy, was I going to help them. And what it really came down to was I ended up learning an awful lot. And I ended up really realizing how much help I needed to make this organization really be better, and to even add what I could to it. It was really important to me to find ways to connect the organization to other partners, to new partners. Boy, if there's one thing that geography will teach you is that, boy, everybody loves their silos. I mean, look, if you're in Richmond, it's like you need a passport to go across the river now to begin with. And the way sometimes some organizations don't work great. But in this particular town and in Franklin County, one thing I could bring to the table was, okay, why is everybody acting like across the street doesn't exist? Like, we've got to connect some things here. And the last but not least, if I can spend 8 years emceeing bluegrass, which I'm not the biggest fan of, for little concerts of 20 people to raise money for new lampposts, you can find a way to add to your community and do something for where you live. All right. I could tell you how I ended up standing next to my NGC compatriots, who I have no business being a part of, okay? Because next generation is not meant to necessarily describe a 30 or 40, 35, yeah, right, 45-year-old man who gets to spend time with the next generation group. Trust me, it's a nice long story. I could explain it all to you, right? The fact that Kim Watson, formerly of SOAR, was in one of my classes at U of R. She conned me into the development committee. I had John Walker speak at one of the events I was putting together, all the way to building up these leadership workshops that I led to be a part of. But this isn't why I do any of this. So this is why I do this. Sorry. This is my best friend, Jamie. We've been friends for almost 3 decades now. And this is his daughter, Lila, who has severe special needs. She's going to need care her whole life. And this is why I do what I do with SOAR. Jamie, who is already on his way to be actually a relatively well-known actor. I know if I named a bunch of stuff, you'd know a lot of the commercials that he was in. He was starting to get bigger roles. Lila was born, and now he's a stay-at-home dad, and he absolutely loves every single minute of it. But this is why, when I found SOAR, in many ways, it was like SOAR found me. And so this is why I do what I do. I mean, yes, there's many ways that hopefully I can help SOAR and that SOAR can help others. But I have to keep it in mind. This is why I do what I do. Which, for me, gets to evolve into my own daughter. So this is Addie, who formerly was that tiny little thing being held by a newscaster, volunteering with me, at Camp Baker. She, through her HPT and her high school, she's gonna be doing her mentorship with SOAR. So she's gonna spend hours upon hours, dozens of hours with SOAR this summer. And she sees the importance. She's known Jamie her entire life, right? So she's known Lila's entire life. And it gets to be something that gets to be rooted at our core as a family. So with my work with SOAR, all I can say to you from an advice standpoint is to take the next step. Just do it, right? And to constantly evangelize the organization and connect you and your connections, even as a young professional. I know sometimes it feels like you are coming out of the gate and the only people you know are the people that you were in the dorm you were in college, or like your coworkers. But trust me, your connections have value. I mean, everyone, both from what they can do, who they are, their enthusiasm, and they will love what you love and give it a chance because of you. Love is also just getting your hands dirty, doing things and volunteering for things that you would typically never normally do. I already told you I'm not an outdoor guy, and I've already done some outdoor stuff. But the point is, you have to get out of your comfort zone. Now, this next part is actually a complete contradiction to what I'm telling you right now, which is my story. Everyone needs to know what organization you support and why it is special. They don't have to know the exact reasons why you support it. What your core reasons, my Lila, is not to be, it doesn't need to be plastered out to everybody because it's not about you, right? They don't need to know why you're special. You need to tell everybody why the organization is special so they can keep helping the people or the animals or the community that means something to you. And what I'm getting at there is your works become your evidence. Now, I know that's a complete contradiction to the fact that I'm just telling you all about myself now for 20 minutes. But the point is, like, let that work be that for you. I could tell you how my youngest, Amelia, and my wife got roped into being in a television PSA for the Poe Museum. And there's, a nice story behind that. There's the Poe Museum. I got to join the board in 2019. I got to go from a fan to responsibility in like the blink of an eye. And next year, we're going to celebrate 100 years of our mission and 100 years of being even an organization, which is crazy to me to be a part of any organization that's been around for 100 years. And yeah, there's lots of great reasons that someone could be a part of the Poe Museum. And sometimes you might do things because your kids would be thrilled that you're doing them. This is my daughter, Addie. Again, this is let's say this is like 6th grade with her birthday party at the Poe Museum. The cupcakes my wife, Caroline, her stepmom, made for her. And you might do them because your kids would be thrilled. But if I'm being very honest with you, it's that I would do this because Teen Dean would be thrilled that I'm a part of the Poe Museum. So I come by a love of Poe, honestly, as a recovering goth. And let me itemize here. So everything from, notice my hair is dyed black despite the fact that it's dark brown. So it's kind of a pointless dye, really. And yet I did it religiously with this like faux Shakespeare thing going on. The 9 Inch Nails shirt, alabaster complexion, still have that, come by that very honestly. Excessive but personally meaningful accessory, check. I would move on to like cuff bracelets now as an adult. But the point being, I picked Poe Museum in part because it's just something I liked. I've done lots of stuff in my life, especially as a business owner, that you do for networking purposes. You do that even for a nonprofit, right? Even for fundraising, right? You could end up with rooms of people you would never normally end up in a room with. This one I did for me and joined the organization for me. So my advice to you based on some of my work with the Poe Museum is to get to know how the organization actually operates. And what I mean by that is I didn't know anything about running a museum when I joined the Poe board. I have learned more about museums and how they operate and I am trying to be as voracious as possible. I got to see Danielle's presentation through the VAM conference. I've been like just consuming VAM content like crazy, and just to be able to kind of get in with that, trying to appreciate what gets done day to day and who does it. Really studying the structure of the organization, not because there's going to be a test later, but because it helps you appreciate those people who really make it work. It also helps me study myself and realize what is it I can actually bring to the table, and being very open, just like we said earlier with the community partnership stuff, realizing what it is I don't know how to do and not being scared of it. We recently had a conversation with Sue actually because, and I kind of can't believe I'm saying this out loud, I was like, maybe I should like put myself on the finance committee, even though I hate everything about finance stuff. I'm like the last person in the universe that will ever raise my hand for treasurer, even back when I was in like a kid group in school. But I know it's something I don't know, and that I need to know to appreciate how this museum operates. And so I'm going to put myself in the uncomfortable position, right? But I think that's really important because that's what I'm getting out of this, right? Is I'm able to grow. I treat my own service as a learning opportunity. And it really then is about kind of removing the ego as a part of that. So the last little study is I could tell you how I ended up standing with 3 people, one of whom I knew pretty well, the other one I hardly knew at all, around some weird looking Star Wars piece of equipment in front of what used to be Lumpkin's jail. And it really started about 6 months ago, almost exactly. June 1st, Don Treese and I had a meeting together And I was just asking him how was he doing? It was 1 week after George Floyd was murdered. And we would always get together. So, it was not an unusual thing to get together. It wasn't a pandemic. But just to find that out and to start talking about like, what could we do beyond activism? Like what's something we could do? And so in 6 months, we wanted to answer a question, and it wasn't the question of do monuments teach history or any of that crap. It was what doesn't get a monument? And we just let that be our North Star. And so with that, because I'm like a, ex-goth malcontent, I basically said, well, if we can answer this question and also change people's perspective on the city that they live in, that means we can kind of break them a little bit. They'll never travel down this road the same way than they used to. They'll never be able to park in this parking lot without knowing what used to be in this parking lot, if we could really change their perspective. And so that became sort of my little personal mission as a part of this. And so that's where this was really the bit of like, how do we do this? Well, in 6 months, we built this thing, hiddeninplainsight.org. It's both a web experience, it's a VR experience if you have VR, but if you don't, you can do it just on the website. And we created this thing. We had jobs. No one paid us to do this. It was just 3 people. We did not ask for permission. We just sort of did it. And it has basically violated every single rule of PR I have ever been taught or taught anyone. Style Weekly emailed us to ask if they could do a cover story on us, which, let me just tell you, after like 20 some odd years in public relations, never happens. Isn't supposed to happen, actually. And we've gotten ridiculous attention for it. And trust me, I know it may not seem like it by putting up a splash screen like this, but like, it is such a humbling thing for us. We did not know what we were doing. We truly did not when we created this thing. And so now we're trying to move on and do more for other cities and things like that. But the things I want you to take away from this is, first off, this is something I did not because it was an organization that existed. It's because it was something that didn't exist, but we had to do it. But one thing I really want to highlight here is this very first bullet. And I want to point out, even in my little quick bio slide early on, there's a lot of co-founder, co-writer. If there's anything I could tell you from a young professional standpoint, it's to co-everything. Find teams, find people that have the same passion, even if they have wildly divergent skill sets. Anybody, and there's several on this call, who have ever been in a room with one or all 3 of us from Hidden in Plain Sight, we are radically different people. Like, there's not actually a good reason we would ever normally have done anything together. But we like finish each other's, someone said sandwiches because I've heard frozen too much. Anyways, sentences, and we're like this strange copacetic, like fantastic engine now. But I think that it's important that it's not any one of us that's sort of the leader of it. It's really all 3 of us. We also didn't ask permission, but a part of that was also not to be afraid of change, and to really embrace the chaos that was going around at that time and understand it may be a great moment to make a mark and to leave something for other people. One other really big thing I want to point out that I always like pointing out with Hidden in Plain Sight is that we didn't say, all right, we're going to do a VR project and it's also going to have to do with social justice, or it's going to have to do with history. We said, no, our passion was first. How can we change people's perspective and what doesn't get monuments? The tech part was all secondary. We wanted to always be free. We wanted anybody with any kind of phone or computer to be able to use it, even if you didn't have a VR thing. And so the whole point was we let the passion drive. And honestly, you could probably say that about any of these little cases that I've talked about today. But I think this one is especially true because it literally came out of nowhere and out of nothing. And now we're looking at and exploring the idea of creating a nonprofit that allows this to continue beyond us, we've even talked about working with organizations that could teach young kids how to do this themselves so that they could take a look at the world around them and overlay history and change it and understand. We just think there's so much more to do, and finding more and more people that would like to do that with us. So, all right, all that crap. So what? How can you use this? If nothing else, take away Like, just try and find out what are your real reasons, right? The ones that are deep down, what, you know, use me, you know, as that example, if you need, you know, what's your Lila, right? Your Jamie and Lila. You know, then figure, okay, how do I get there? Who do I need to talk about? How do I need to talk to find out more? All the great advice that people have already shared today. Don't be afraid of collaboration. I know I've made it seem like it's about me by doing an entire presentation on my experiences, but it's actually not. Think about it from the standpoint of find organizations, find people, find causes that make you more you. I can't begin to tell you how rewarding that will be, but also the lack of fit you will find if you don't think about it that way. And that no one will be getting out of you what you could be giving, and you won't be getting out of it what you could be developing as you as a person. But if you can follow that thread, I think that you will find an incredible reward for both yourself and the organization will, because they'll start to realize what they've got and that they can really grow because of you. And I think that's a really special thing. Also, don't wait. I want to challenge everyone. I want you to write, even if it's a thank you, even if it's like a really short, obtuse note, even if it's just going online and finding someone on LinkedIn and hitting connect. I want you to do something today about an org you care about, whether you're already engaged or you're not. Okay, do it Monday at the latest. If you don't want to do it today, I get it. But think about a way you can offer your skills and your interest. Ask to be connected to some people that you can help most and the ways that you can help best. And be deferential. I cannot express that enough. They know their organization. You are trying to get to know their organization. Start out deferential and stay deferential to who those people are, what the staff do every single day, and it will always put you in a position of serving the need of the organization before serving yourself. And also, maybe more importantly, not wasting their time trying to make you feel good about your contribution, but instead showing how you can help and then being deferential to be able to step in when they need you. I also, again, just kind of building off of one of the things I said earlier, think really hard about the organizations of choice. You're just getting started in some cases. Think about what you care about. All the stories I told stretch back 20 years right now for me. And yet there's some that have all developed in the last couple of years. But think about what you care about, look for the orgs that align, and look all around you. You may be amazed just the sheer volume of nonprofits that are in Richmond. Some are brand new. Some are, trying to fill a very specific gap. Some are filling so much general needs for bigger populations or even small populations. I mean, there's every stripe. And there's some great ones that are even, I'd say, that really have their crap together, that are great to be a part of also, just because you could learn so much about an organization like that and be able to take it to another one and say, oh my gosh, here's what I learned working with the Children's Museum. And that's going to help you, and be able to take that to other organizations. I can't tell you how much, I literally did it in the development committee. I think it was, maybe my second or third meeting in the development committee. I probably should have been like seen, not heard. And I'm like already trying to get the Poe Museum and the SOAR to play nice together. I realize that on its face, these two organizations probably don't seem like they have a lot in common, but I'm like, there's no reason why you shouldn't. Reading and education, you need reading programs. Like, let's start just smashing all of our favorite toys together like we're playing in the backyard. But it also meant people thinking out of the box too, because everybody's very focused on what they do. And so look all around you, think about the things that you could connect for them too. And then last but not least, tell that organization of choice to buckle up, get your hands dirty, do everything, show them that you care through your enthusiasm, show them you care because you actually care. Like, what a weird concept, but you do need to say that. Show them you care by listening to them and tell them why you care, and then turn around and tell everyone else why you care about that organization. And I think those are just important things to keep in mind as you not just like go to a bar because a receipt goes to the organization you care about, or do that one day of volunteering because your work set it up. But then you really find that you're doing things for the right reasons. Just remember, you too can go from the stuff that would have like actually mattered to you when you were younger to being able to talk to somebody as old as you were then and see their face light up and connect those dots of why we're doing this. There's no feeling in a universe like that. All right. So that's me. Please link into me, email, whatever. I'm going to stop sharing so we can actually look at chat too. And I'll open up for questions. Anybody have any questions for me? And what we're going to do is transition after this like little moment is we'll open it up for questions for everybody that you've heard from today too.
Thank you, Dean, so much for sharing such an insightful presentation. I feel like I wrote down so many things of different ways that I personally can get involved with other nonprofits. I know I work for a nonprofit, and so I tend to that's where my brain goes. But I really liked what you said about what makes you you. And now I'm starting to think about other nonprofits that I can get involved with in the area.
And something I should point out, and this is a little bit of a plug for SOAR too, is that you also may be shocked what what a nonprofit even does. Like, I'll be honest, I thought I knew what SOAR did. And then I was like, oh my God, you guys do like 30 more things than I would have ever imagined that you do. And I'm sure that's true. I mean, I know that that's true for everybody who's even here, whether it's Laura Goodwill, Danielle at Children's Museum. I mean, I know that these organizations, there's like the obvious things that like, oh, Children's Museum, right, museums, right? And like, but the programming, and like all of these other things that go on, you may be really shocked to find out the breadth of some of the organizations that you'd like to be a part of. Oh man, there's a great question in chat right there. How to find time while parenting. Oh, boy, do I know that. Especially now that we have one on the way. So, I'm going to have a 17-year-old, an 18-month-old, and a newborn really soon. If I'm being like real kind of like, crazy about it, it's like, well, you just find time. But I think more than that is that finding time while parenting, I think, has a lot to do with putting I would put a lot of time and choice of that organization, and then let that organization know how you can help and the limits of that. I mean, every organization knows if you're a volunteer by nature, they know that you have other responsibilities, whether it's work, home, everything. You may be surprised what you can do. And I don't mean that as in like you stretching yourself volunteer wise. What I mean by that is they could literally use you to put stamps on things that you could swing by. Look, one of the things during the pandemic I thought was so amazing, and I saw it with SOAR, I saw it with a few other organizations, are like the people that would just show up with like a giant bucket of masks that they made themselves, or like really simple fund drives. It could be an Amazon wish list of things that they need. And your big contribution could be just sharing that list with your friends. So I think what I would do is not think of whether it's parenting or whether you have like an insane work schedule or both, which is most of us now, I think, as we try to get back to normal, the next normal, which I thought was a great phrase. I think that it's more about pick those organizations carefully, and then you can help. You will find surprising ways that you can help. And maybe that is a full weekend you can completely devote to a huge amount of volunteering. And then maybe there's not much you can do for the next few months other than maybe help them review copy on something that they're doing or spreading the word or whatever. I think it's more about you can find a way to puzzle piece in. And I think it is tough. But the good news is, trust me, no one understands that you've got kids more than the staff at the organization you want to work with that also has kids. And so I think that the good news is you have allies within these organizations. I think that'll be cool with that.
Absolutely. And Dean, I would just add to that too, to
No,
talk to the staff about that. Maybe there's a way you can get your kid involved with what you're doing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Goodness. Yeah. I'm certainly living proof of that. Susan, I know your little boys come to the volunteer. it's actually, I think, just as important for them to see you volunteering, even if they do nothing like that's actually helpful, right? You're just giving them things to make sure they're not like burning something down, right? So they're just like carrying a bucket over here. Like them seeing you volunteer is important, right? I mean, that's something that you want to instill too.
We have
And-
another question on balancing involvement with
Yeah.
multiple nonprofits at once.
Yeah, it is tough. And I think it's, but you know what? Well, I'll tell you how I do it. I don't know what's probably a great best practice, and this is maybe one we can open up to everyone else too. But for me personally, I do it two ways. Number one is I talk incessantly about all the other nonprofits I'm involved in front of the other nonprofits. So like I said, I'm one of those kids that like, I'm going to have the He-Man figure, the G.I. Joe figure, you know, the My Little Pony and whatever other toy is, they're in the same toy box. And they all know it and they hear about each other incessantly. But that's one way, is because that also has them, it allows them to understand my commitments, but also then understand that like, I'm happy to try and bring everyone together as needed, but it also lets everybody know that you're busy, and it's not meant to be a blocker. It's just meant to be a practicality. The other thing I would say though too is, again, I think you may look at the nonprofit and find what way to interact works for you. And this is where it may not be about trying to be on leadership of several, right? And I think it may be about, well, I might be a leader over here and a volunteer over here, you know, and that's fine. Because guess what? You're probably going to sunset on one, and that may allow you then to move up in another. And I think, you know, that's a bit of that. I bet that's just going to be time on your side. And you also might find that they have some really interesting ways. Like, I hope, I say this having, poor Laura has like baptism by fire at joining NGC and been, you know, pulled into our earliest event right away. But I think it's a great example that now that this event that she's been a part of with NGC, you know, she's not on the Summerfest, you know, crew, you know, and so it can hopefully puzzle piece sometimes to be a part of the opportunities that they may have. For example, development committee at SOAR. I'm not on the board of SOAR. I'm on the development committee, but it lets me interact with the board members that are on there. Lets me interact with the staff really great. It's once a month, and I can sit there and go, I can absolutely do this commitment, you know, and I'm not stretching myself too far, you know. And I think it is, sometimes it's a bit of puzzle piecing, but I think sometimes you find that these orgs, I think Susan was talking about, or Sue was talking about the like the different committees that you can get on that can really, you know, they may be fine from a commitment standpoint, time commitment standpoint. I'm going to spotlight our amazing speakers today. For Laura in this too.
Yeah, so as Dean's doing that, we're going to move into a generic or an overview question and answer session. So if you have a question for any of our speakers, I'd love for you to put those into the chat now.
And Kayla, I do want to see, I did see your comment that you're in Addie's HPT class. That's awesome. Yeah, so yeah, anybody have any, just, and again, we can just kind of keep reflecting on the same line here too, but you know, thoughts or questions or things you'd love to know from everybody. Everybody do it once. So I'll just kick off with everybody because I'd love to hear Danielle's response too, because I know she had a very specific subject to talk about. But what are some? I know you guys have an incredibly strong junior board. Like you got, I mean, you're a great example, I think, of lots of ways that people can volunteer and like intersect with the organization. I don't know if you want to just talk about that for a second, like, because I think people would be surprised maybe to learn of all the ways that the Children's Museum, that people can help the Children's Museum.
Sure. I mean, I think it's all levels of involvement. And Dean, I loved your response about the balancing multiple nonprofits and the sunsetting because I think it's an ebb and flow, right? So there are some things that you can come and do for a day, which is, I don't know about anybody else who has physical property for their nonprofit, but literally pulling weeds is really helpful. And if you can do that for 2 hours one day, we'll take it, right? But then there's, there's the associate board that they are structured like the governing board, and they have committees and there's involvement, and it's collecting books, or it's, going back to Dean's comment about the Amazon wish list. There's all kinds of ways to get involved. And I think it just depends on where you find that you want to plug in and the amount of time. Be honest with yourself about the amount of time that you have, because there's only so many hours in the day. And as much as I think all of us have probably tried to stretch those hours, it does not work. So how much time do you have? And talk to the organization, because I bet when you come and you say, I've got gardening gloves in 2 hours, they're going to tell you, yes, please weed. Or, hey, I've got a lot of contacts and I love to interact with a lot of people. They're going to put you on their development committee for those once a month meetings, right? Or I'm really jazzed up and I have 8 weeks to help with an event and I'm really good at planning things. And there's an event committee that you can help on. So no doubt that whatever nonprofit that you are interested in organizing, and hopefully it's not like the first response that Sue's photography front, because if that person needs a place to take some pictures, I bet that there are a lot of other places that would love the photography skills. But plug in and there's multiple ways to get involved.
Yeah. Sue, were you guys, I didn't know if you're jumping
No,
in.
I just agree with that. I do agree with that. It sounds like I said disagree, and I don't. I agree with everything that Danielle said. I think there are a variety of ways to get involved, but I would add on, 90% of the nonprofits out there are super responsive and super helpful. And I would venture to guess that the organizations that are not responsive are simply overwhelmed. And that is an opportunity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a great question in the chat here about ideas or resources on helping boards develop a more diverse representation. And I'm just I'll start because I have almost nothing to offer in terms of resources, but other than I know it sometimes seems when you look up towards a board that the immediate inclination is it's a bunch of old rich white. And you're not wrong from a tradition standpoint, but that is thankfully changing. It's radically changing. It's changing much faster than some of those old rich white men really probably wanted it to change, which is fine. That's fine. Anyways, but I think the good news is that perception, which trust me, as a young professional, I remember having this like impenetrable good old boy club, this feeling, even if it wasn't true, like it just seemed like that was probably true, has really begun to change. And I think there's some really great potential stuff for that. So anybody have a more meaningful answer other than just my snarky comments?
Well, I'll just throw out that I think there's a couple of things there. One, diversity is broader than just the color of your skin and the age and the depth of your pocketbook. So I think we have to become more open to the ideas of what does diversity really mean. And I think somewhere in here in my computer, I have a list of like 53 classifications that offer diversity to a nonprofit board. But the other thing is that you have to actually be mindful about it. Mm-hmm. And you have to say, I have a board right now who is really struggling to get rid of someone who, to pull the trigger on asking someone to leave who never shows up because they're African-American. And what you want to do is you want to open up those seats for people who can really step in and contribute. And I think that simply being mindful about putting that at the forefront has a lot of value and power.
I completely agree with what Sue said. I think we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to look at our boards and be very honest with ourselves. And then when you realize that you have a gap, you've got to be intentional about finding how to connect for that gap. So there's a multitude of social networks that happen. And if you keep asking your same board members, you're going to keep getting the same board. So you have got to go outside of that and engage people and have the conversation about coming and joining, because my guess is they haven't been invited because they don't know anybody on your current board. So you've got to expand the conversation.
That's correct. And I think, Dean, you can speak more clearly to the Poe experience in terms of just simply putting it out there that it is an opportunity, and you're bringing somebody along that spectrum from a lurker to a supporter. And, you know, by gathering in the people who visit your museum or who are fans of the work that you do.
Absolutely. Well, and that's actually a great moment to plug also, because, you know, one thing is look at how people recruit for their board. I mean, there's many who are very open about it. And in fact, Poe Museum right now, we're doing it. So we're doing like an open submission, you know, you're going to be vetted, and, you know, it's going to be a nomination process. But if you're interested, and if anyone is interested, board nominations at poemuseum.org. You know, but it's a great point, because I think that it's a great example of we're open to it not being a closed circle that just continues. And I think that's it's always important that the board doesn't just represent and just look like itself, but that it also represents the people that you actually serve, right? And I think why that shouldn't be a tall order. And thankfully, I think it's not a tall order the way that it used to be. Laura, any thought on that too? I don't want to put you on the spot on this particular.
No, it's fine. And I'll just, you know, to kind of wrap things up and pitch it back over to Susan. I think that's one of the things that Source 365 does so well in having things like the Next Gen Council, or having these other opportunities, to Danielle's point about broadening that network. So we may not, you know, those of us who are on the Next Gen Council may not run in the same circles as the board, but we're having that introduction into the organization to, you know, potentially move to that. And so, you know, my charge to folks who aren't currently involved with a board or with a nonprofit is go to those nonprofits and suggest things like junior boards, or suggest things like councils like this. If you really want to see and have some impact on that change, there's, you know, nothing wrong with making those suggestions, to Sue's point, and really putting it out there. So
that's great.
And there's nothing wrong with declining an application to serve on your board because they don't fit. So I think there are a lot of organizations that are just so hungry to have people serve on their board that they just rubber stamp board applications, and without being mindful about what that brings to the table. I have an organization that right now has 4 attorneys on the board, all, you know, limited diversity. And it's like, because they need board members, so they're going to rubber stamp those applications.
Yeah.
So lawyer jokes don't really happen.
I've made a few.
Yeah. Well, so if everybody is comfortable, I mean, everyone who's listening now, if you please, you know, open your mics and just give a round of applause to Sue and Danielle and Laura and just everybody for their time today. Thank you so much, everybody.
Indeed.
Yes.
And Susan, you want to close us out?
Yes. So I just want to share this picture of Samuel, just to circle back to the opening story. This is a picture of Samuel at summer camp, where everything is different for him. So this is my why of why I care so deeply about SOAR 365. And then I just want to remind everyone, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and thank our speakers for donating their time on the Saturday morning to spend their time with us. And thank you for registering for this event and coming and hanging out with us for the morning. And I want to recognize again Tito's Handmade Vodka for being the sponsor of our event. This was such a great opportunity, and I hope you guys will save the date. I think we have tentatively set May 21st, 2022 for our 3rd annual Nonprofit Leadership Workshop for next year. So if you do want to get involved, that's a great way to kind of get started. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a great Saturday.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.